everyone, it's Stacey. Welcome to Quilt Club with Stacey Lee. Thank you so much for joining me for week 1 of my 5-week American Flags Quilt along. And as you can see, I've got a sample here of what the quilt will look like. I absolutely love it and I can't wait to make one with you. If you're new to Quilt Club, please make sure you've subscribed to my newsletter, and you'll find all the information in the description below, which will link you to my blog where you can sign up for my newsletter, where you'll get my supplies list, and then I'll send you weekly emails with everything you need to know to make this gorgeous American Flags quilt. But for now, let's get going. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do is give our fabric a good press. I've got my 5 reds and my 5 blues. And remember, you can iron it however you like and whatever your preference is. You might like to use steam or a spray water bottle rather than the steam, or you might like to use starch, but just do whatever your preference is and give every piece a nice press, including about a yard of your white fabric. So remembering, we want to press our fabric, but we also don't want to be here all day, so I'm kind of half ironing and half pressing. Once you've pressed all your fabric, I'll see you at the cutting mat. So now our fabric's pressed, we're going to cut it, and I'm going to start with the blue. We need 3 8.5 inch by 6.5 inch rectangles. I've got the fold line towards me. I'm lining that up on a line. I'm then going to take my ruler. First I'm making sure it really is lined up nicely on a line. I'm going to take my ruler, and it looks like the best number for me to use on my mat is 10. So I'm going to line it up with the 10 at the bottom, 10 at the top, and it's also lined up nicely on my ruler. I can see that the fold line is lined up perfectly on that line on my ruler. So when everything's lined up, I'll double check it, triple check it. I'll put my hand down firmly, hand fanned out, pinky off to the side, fingers away from the edge. I'll turn my cutter on. I'll start from before the beginning of the fabric and press firmly, but not too firmly, up to the tips of my fingers. Then I'll pause, move my hand up and press firmly again, and then I'll continue on. And if I need to, I can pause again and move my hand again. I can check that was a nice cut, and it was. And then now what I can do is turn this around and just check that I've got a perfect right angle. So my fold is on the line here, and my nice new cut is on the line here, and I've got a perfect right angle. So now we need to cut it 8.5 inches wide. So I'll take my ruler again. I'm going to line it up at 8.5 at the top, 8.5 at the bottom, which is marked on my mat. I'm just going to move that up to this line. I always find it easier not to be on the bottom line. So I'm making sure my fold is nicely lined up on this line. My edge is lined up on 0, which means I know I can cut at 8.5 inches to get my 8.5 inch strip. So I'm lining up my ruler with 8.5 at the bottom, 8.5 at the top. I can see that the line of my ruler is also lined up perfectly on the fold of my fabric, and then I'll double check, triple check, and when I'm happy, I'll cut again. So now we have our 8.5 inch wide. So now we need to cut 3 8.5 by 6.5 inch rectangles. So we need to do the same thing. We need to get our first nice straight cut edge. So I'm lining it up with any line on my mat. I'm taking my ruler, and now I can line up the straight edge of my cut on a line on my ruler at the top and at the bottom, and just cut off the selvage here. Then I'm going to turn that around. So I'm going to put my straight edge on 0. You could put it on 1 or 2 or whatever, but I'm going to use 0. And on my straight edge is also on this line here, so I can tell that's nice and straight. I'm going to take my ruler and line it up with 6.5 inches at the top of my mat and 6.5 inches at the bottom. And then what I can also do is make sure that it's lining up on a line on my ruler. So I'm using the ruler and my mat in this instance. So we're 6.5 inches at the top, 6.5 inches at the bottom. My line on my ruler is lined up nice and straight. When I've double checked, triple checked, I'm ready to cut. And then what we can do is we can leave that there, smooth out this fabric, and if we wanted to, we could now come across and then cut it at 13, which is 6.5 plus 6.5 is 13. And again, I'm lining my ruler up with 13 at the top, 13 at the bottom. I'm going to line it up with the line on my ruler on my fabric. So my fabric's edge is lined up perfectly with a line on my ruler. Then I'll double check, triple check, and when I'm happy, I'll cut. And then what I can do is add another 6.5 inches on, which is 19.5. And do exactly the same. So we're lining it up with 19.5 at the top, at the bottom. I'm lining it up with a line on my ruler on the edge of my fabric. Double checking, triple checking, and when I'm happy, I'll cut. So now you've got your 3 8.5 by 6.5 inch rectangles. You need to do that for each of your 5 blue fabrics, please. So now we'll cut our red fabric. We need 5 2-inch strips from each of the 5 red fabrics that we have. So again, I'm going to line up my fold on a line on my mat to get my first nice straight cut. So I'm making sure that it's straight, I'm smoothing it out. And then I'm going to take my ruler and I'm going to cut on 11, just because that's where mine happens to be. So I'll line it up at the bottom, at the top, and then I'll double check, triple check. I've got this line on my ruler lined up with the fold line on my fabric. And then when I'm happy, I'll cut. And then we'll flip that over. And I'm going to line it up again on a line on my mat on the fold. And then what we're going to do is, because we can get 2 inches from our ruler, we'll use our ruler to measure our 2-inch strips. We couldn't do that with the blue fabric because our ruler wasn't wide enough, but we can with our 2-inch strips, so we might as well, seeing as we're cutting quite a lot. So what I'm going to do is take my ruler and I'm going to take some painter's tape or masking tape, and I'm just going to put it right next to the 2-inch line and mark that. Now remember, that's not telling me exactly where to cut it. It's just telling me that if I'm lined up to the line right next to my masking tape or painter's tape, that's exactly where I want to be. So it's just a visual guide to make sure we're never cutting shorter or larger. We're always cutting at exactly 2 inches. So once I've done that, all I need to do now is line up the fold on a line on my ruler, and then I need to line up a line on my ruler to the edge of my fabric at the 2, and I know it's the 2 because I've got the masking tape and it's the first line after the masking tape. And then when I'm happy, I'll double check, triple check, and cut. So that's my first 2-inch strip. And remember, we can do the trick of opening it up and just placing it on a line and making sure it's nice and straight through the fold. Sometimes you can get little elbows, but this one looks perfect to me. So I'll take my ruler I'll line up a line on the fold of my fabric. Then I'll line up my 2-inch line on the edge of my fabric along the whole edge, and then I'll double check, triple check, and when I'm happy I'll cut. And then I'll continue until I've got 5 2-inch strips. So now I've cut 5 2-inch strips from my red fabric. I need you to do that for each of your 5 different fabrics, please. So now we're going to cut our white fabric, and we've got quite a lot of it, so I've just folded up what I'm not using on the side here, and as I need it I'll just unroll it. I've ironed approximately a yard of it because that's around about how much we'll need, and we need to cut 18 2-inch strips. So we're going to do exactly what we just did before. We'll cut our first nice straight line. My fold is here, and we'll just get a nice straight line to start with. And then I'll just flip that around. And I'll take my ruler, and I'm using my ruler to measure my 2-inch strips. So just like we did before, a line in my ruler is lined up with the fold in my fabric, and then the 2-inch mark is lined up with the edge of my fabric, and I've got my tape here just as a visual guide to show me where 2 inches is, and then I'm going to cut that, and I'll do 18 cuts. And then we're done with cutting our fabric for today. So that wraps up week 1. Once you've finished cutting your fabric, it's a good idea to match up your reds with your blues and how you'd like them to be on your quilt. So what I would do is have a little play and match them up the best you can and how you like them. And a good idea is to take a photo so that when we're sewing, and if you've gotten all confused and forgotten which way you wanted to match them, you've got something to refer back to. Thank you for joining me, and next week we're going to begin sewing our flags, and I'll see you then. Thank you for watching my videos. If you're enjoying them, please like, subscribe, and leave a comment.